We need to talk. Daniel de la Rosa Anaya, Attorney General for Baja California Sur, spoke out in an interview on Tuesday. This is his second interview regarding the Shanquella Robinson case in the past few days. He first appeared and discussed the case during a press conference alongside the governor of Los Cabos, Victor Castro Cosio. And on Tuesday, he did an interview for the American People with the Mexican journalist. Both occurrences included an update replete with a fair amount of finger pointing. And with each appearance, Mexico's stance on the case is becoming crystal clear. The responsibility for the crime lies squarely on the shoulders of the Cabo Six, and no one in Mexico will be held accountable for their part in the cover-up. Even with this revelation, I was struck by something that was laid out during the interview. After the Attorney General answered the questions in legalese, the reporter circled back to put emphasis on key points he wanted us to take away from the interview, one that didn't quite sit right with me, and we must talk about. We're going to get into it. We're going to get into the breaking news, exclusive new revelation the reporter made about Winter Donovan's call. But first, be sure to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on updates to this story, trending topics, and so much more. Now let's get into it. Until 2 weeks ago, we had the video, the police report, and Nazir's Instagram Live as our main points of view into what happened to Shanquella on the day she was murdered. We all know that the police report is full of misinformation. It makes a sad attempt to convince you that the doctor was fighting for Shanquella's survival until 5:57 p.m. when she declared Shanquella deceased. You remember, it looked like the doctor leapt into life-saving measures at 4:20 p.m. after she had been there an hour already. But 2 weeks ago, a bit of new information surfaced, and that was the 911 report that was shared with us. And because many of us were expecting to hear Winter's voice and the actual 911 call recording, we were frustrated and passed it off as propaganda, just more of the same misinformation we had already heard from the police report. After reviewing the report closely, it's true, a lot of the information in the 911 report comes directly from the police report, but there's a critical piece of information, a nuance that I'm afraid we missed. We'll get into it, but let's first fast forward to last Tuesday's interview the Mexican reporter did with Daniel de la Rosa Anaya. During the interview with the Attorney General, this point was emphasized. The people there with Shanquella reported an accidental death to the emergency numbers. Let me repeat that. The people there with Shanquella reported an accidental death to the emergency numbers. Now, this is different from how we perceived it originally. This says to me that when Winter called 911, she called to report the accidental death of Shanquella. In other words, this means Shanquella was either already deceased when Winter called 911, or she died during the process of the call. Now, many of us have already concluded that Shanquella passed away around 7:25 a.m. from the assault video, the shoddy police report, and personal accounts from Nazir and the maid. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out part 3 of this video series, Death Blow. And if my sleuthy senses are correct, this is the first time the Attorney General is publicly confirming what we have all concluded, that Shanquella was dead when they called 911. Now, I may be wrong, but based on some of my findings, I'm inclined to believe that you meant it exactly as you said it, sir. Because after all, your title does say breaking news, exclusive new revelations. And to my understanding, everything else, excluding this point, was confirmation of what we already knew. Am I correct? Now, I know things are lost in translation. I completely understand that. And we also have the saying here in the U.S., don't shoot the messenger, which means don't get angry at or punish the person who is simply delivering the bad news because he's not responsible for it. So that we are clear, it's not my intent to shoot the messenger. I simply want clarity in this matter. So would you be so kind as to clarify or confirm this statement so that we all understand it the same? I have already seen videos from creators questioning this statement, and some have even gone so far as to state what they think you meant. I don't want to do that, sir. I don't want to assume what you meant. I want to know what you meant so that we don't create any additional misinformation or misunderstandings in this case. Let's take a listen to the statement in question.
Que las personas que estaban con Shanquella Robinson reportaron a los números de emergencia una muerte accidental.
That the people who were with Shanquella reported an accidental death to the emergency numbers.
This point was stated many times in this way, both by you and your guest, the Attorney General. Are you saying, sir, that when Winter Donovan called 911, she stated that Shanquella was already dead? If this is true, you do realize that this makes the doctor and Mexico look worse than before. It reveals more of her incompetence and Mexico's willingness to support it. Hear me out. The police report says Shanquella had a seizure at 4:20 p.m. You can see it here. At 4:20 p.m., she presented with a generalized tonic-clonic seizure lasting less than a minute with sphincter relaxation, to which her friend named Winter Donovan proceeds to dial 911 to request an ambulance. According to this statement from the police report, Winter should have made the 911 call somewhere around 4:21 p.m., right? The seizure was at 4:20 p.m. It was less than a minute. So the call should have been placed during the seizure or immediately following. Let's look at what happened next. It says here, in the process, patient has difficulty breathing, decreased pulse, and is given rescue breaths. You see it here. In the process says to me that during and immediately following the seizure, Shanquella had difficulty breathing. I've placed the definition of in the process here so you can see it for yourself. And because of the breathing difficulties Shanquella exhibited, the doctor started rescue breaths. Okay, that means rescue breaths should have started somewhere around 4:22 p.m. or 4:23 p.m., immediately following the seizure, correct? And Winter should have been on that phone with 911 by then as well. Sound reasonable so far? So why is it in the 911 report that was shared with us a couple of weeks ago, does it say that Winter called 911 at 4:37 p.m.? Let's take a listen.
La información que logramos obtener es la llamada de auxilio al 911. Entró a las 4:37 de la tarde del 29 de octubre del 2022.
The information we obtained is that the 911 call was made at 4:37 p.m. on the afternoon of October 29th, 2022.
I also confirmed this with the 911 report itself. Here, you can see it here. Recibo in Spanish means I receive. We have it here in the report. Recibo 163602. This time converts to 4:36 p.m. from the military time shown on the report. You can see the 911 call center received the call at 4:36 p.m. The time between 4:37 p.m. and 4:22 p.m. is 15 minutes. That means 15 additional minutes goes by before Winter made the 911 call. This is according to the official documents coming out of Mexico, the police report and the 911 report. So you mean to tell me that someone was rendering rescue breaths for 15 minutes before someone decides to make a call to 911? Really? Who rendered those breaths, Attorney General? Nazir claimed he rendered rescue breaths. Did he help during this time? It's not lost on me that we are solely talking about rescue breaths at this time, not CPR compressions. If Nazir rendered those breaths, what was Dr. Carolina doing from 4:22 to 4:37 p.m. while rescue breaths were given? Did Dr. Carolina's medical training ever teach her to call 911 if she encounters someone who is unresponsive and not breathing? Healthline says call 911 immediately. It also says if you are in a group, ask someone to call 911. This information is known to civilians. Even children know to do this. So why wouldn't a professional know to do this around 4:21 p.m.? Every second counts in these situations, right? Even if she were alone, best practices are to administer 5 cycles and then call 911. See it here. If she had done just this, the call would have been somewhere around 4:23 p.m. But Dr. Carolina wasn't alone, was she? She didn't have to do it herself. She had 6 others in the room with her. In fact, with something so alarming as someone gasping to breathe and having a seizure, a rational person would expect more than one person to call 911. So I ask you, did Dr. Carolina ever have professional command of the room? She was the professional in this situation, right? Don't you think that by this time, a trained professional would have fully understood that she needed to call 911 immediately? So why did it take 15 minutes to dial 3 numbers? Based on this information alone, it's not unreasonable to believe that Shanquella was already deceased when Winter called 911. According to the police report and this new revelation, Shanquella struggled to breathe for 15 minutes before someone anyone took it upon themselves to even pick up the phone and call for emergency help. Attorney General, I ask you, who's accountable for this lapse in time? Is it the Cabo Six or Dr. Carolina? Now, what else happened? Dr. Carolina states on the police report that she began CPR maneuvers with the help of one of the Cabo Six at 4:49 p.m. because she stopped feeling a pulse. You can see it here. At 4:49, the general practitioner mentions she stopped feeling a pulse and begins CPR maneuvers with the help of one of her friends until the ambulance arrived, and continued with the CPR sessions for a total of 14 CPR sessions. This statement is also confirmed on the 911 report when translated. So in other words, Dr. Carolina started CPR maneuvers at 4:49 p.m. and continued them until the paramedics arrived to assist her. And between the doctor and the paramedics, a total of 14 cycles of CPR were administered. This is absolutely absurd. Here's why. Let's do some simple math. According to firstaidforfree.com, it takes 2 minutes to perform 5 cycles of CPR with compressions. You can see it here. So I'm going to be generous and round up the 14 cycles the doctor reported to 15 cycles. In order to get to the 15 cycles, we have to complete 3 sets of 5 cycles. 3 times 5 cycles equals 15 cycles, right? So now we know it takes 2 minutes for every 5 cycles. And we need 3 sets of 5 cycles to account for the 14 cycles they performed. Okay, 2 minutes times 3 sets equals 6 minutes. It takes 6 minutes to complete 15 cycles of CPR. Now, 4:49 p.m. plus 6 minutes is 4:55 p.m. So if the doctor did 14 rounds of CPR starting at 4:49 p.m., she would have completed them by 4:55 p.m. In the 911 report, the ambulance reports their arrival time to be 5:19 p.m. You can see it here. The verb llegar in Spanish means to arrive, and the LLEG that we see here is an abbreviation of llegar. And you can see it here. The time the ambulance arrived is 17:19, which is the same as 5:19 p.m. It took the ambulance 30 minutes to arrive to the villa. And if Dr. Carolina started CPR at 4:49 p.m., she would have had to do 75 cycles of CPR while waiting for the paramedics to get there. Here's how we know. 30 minutes divided by 2 minutes for every 5 cycles gives us 15 sets. Okay, 15 times 5 cycles for each set gives us 75 cycles. In order for Dr. Carolina to pass the baton to the paramedics without any disruption in delivery of CPR, they had to be there. They didn't arrive until 5:19 p.m. And so the number of cycles she would have had to complete from 4:49 p.m. to 5:19 p.m. while waiting for their arrival would have been 75 cycles of CPR. Now, I'm told by many medical professionals that CPR is very taxing and that even 14 cycles is a lot for one person to administer. So how did Dr. Carolina start CPR at 4:49 p.m. and hand off to the paramedics and only complete 14 CPR cycles among them? Impossible. And that clearly explains this picture to me now. Dr. Carolina was doing nothing in this picture when they arrived. Her hands were down. Her head is down. She's not in an emergency posture. There is no evidence of CPR in that tight space. Where is the friend who was helping her? Shanquella's shirt is neatly pulled down, and the paramedics walked in to see an infarcted person, as indicated on line 10 of the 911 report. You can see it here. Is this saying she had already succumbed to cardiac arrest by this time? So I ask you, who's accountable for the nonsensical medical assessments and narratives, the lapses in time, lapses in judgment, egregious misstatements of fact, and failure to provide a level of medical care as one would expect from a paramedic, a nurse, and yes, even a doctor with similar education and experience? Is this the fault of the Cabo Six or Dr. Carolina? And by the way, sir, is this really a 911 call center report, or is it an ambulance's incident report? I ask because I see here that a great deal of data from the police report was entered the next day, October 30th, 2022 at 1:52 a.m. when the ambulance was completing transport of the body. This is not as it happened. In other words, it's not a live transcript of what was happening in real time. I would expect a 911 report to have real-time timestamps. Also, where are lines 11 through 30? They are missing from the report. Why? I would not only expect a 911 call report to have real-time timestamps, but I would also expect the calls in time to be prominently displayed, but I don't see it here. And before I end our conversation, I have one more question for Mr. Attorney General. If it were your daughter laying there with a dislocated neck, unable to move or speak, but could hear and see everything that was happening to her as she labored to take her final breaths, and Dr. Carolina showed up to render the level of care depicted in this case, would we find you protecting her? Shout out to all my sources, healthline.com, familydoctor.org, firstaidforfree.com, merriam-webster.com, Gerardo Zuniga, Justice for Shanquella.